Good morning, YouTube. Let's get this spread. Honestly, does anyone say that anymore? Anyways, array count 9. Ooh, we're dealing with arrays now. Okay, so if you guys don't know what an array is, it looks like this. Something in square brackets with a bunch of numbers, or a bunch of strings, or a bunch of booleans. This is called an int array, I guess you could say, because it just has ints inside. But I think an array could have various types of variables inside and unique variable types. And I think another important aspect is to understand that arrays are a lot like strings, because you can go through them and index through them and iterate through them. You know, you can iterate through a string just as you can iterate through an array. If you have a string that is like this, then you can have an array that's like this. And that is literally the same when it comes to going through like a for loop. It's a very similar process in how you're checking for things. So let's read the problem. Given an array of ints, return the number of nines in the array. So it's just like saying return the number of nines in the string. How do you check for the number of nines in a string? If you said for loop, very good. And if you remember, number of nines, what does that mean? Starts with C, ends with an outer or out. Yeah, that's right. You guessed it. We're gonna have a count. I don't know why I say count. I guess counter is cool. Counter equals 0. And we're gonna have a for loop because we're iterating through this, right? If you have an array, most likely gonna have a for loop. You have a string, most likely, well, in some cases, gonna have a for loop, right? So for I in range, and same thing here, len nums, right? Length of a string, similar, len nums. Nums is actually very common. There are two words that many people use, r and nums. These are like two popular array names you'll see in problems. Okay, so, and nums definitely means that you're dealing with numbers, right? Integer arrays. Okay, so don't forget your colon at the end of a for loop. And for I in range len nums, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the array and we're going to check if a number is 9. And if it's 9, then we increment the counter. Okay, so if that number is 9, how do you check if that number is 9? How do you check if the first number is 9? You would say nums 0. But we can't check for the first number while we iterate, right? The 0 will be 0 when I is 0, right? And I starts at 0 in the very beginning. So nums I in the first iteration is nums 0. Nums I in the second iteration is nums 1, and so on, right? Until we hit that length nums. Okay, so if nums I equals 9, then, oops, you guessed it, counter plus equals 1. I guess I never really mentioned this, but counter equals counter plus 1, these things are literally the same thing. Now, when we deal with arrays, then plus equals and equals nums plus 1 and nums plus equals 1 or whatever is going to be very different. And of course, you can't add an integer to an array, but you'll see how plus equals and equals plus is very different when it comes to different variable types, but not so different with integers. With integers, you don't really have to worry. So both of these could work. I like plus equals 1 because it's very fast, and then you can just return the counter. Okay. Very, very cool.